So the story begins in the 17th century when a great woman of that century, Lady Anne Clifford, she was a philanthropist. She bought land in Exeter in memory of her mother. She set up a trust, and the trust stated that part of the rent of the land would go towards the education of a poor child in the parish of St Stephen's. So fast forward 150 years or so, beginning of the 19th century, it was known as the parish field, and it was being rented out every 7 years to local farmers. By the mid 19th century, the ground was also being used by travelling shows. They were setting up here in the summer months, and cricket was being played, rugby was being played here. The first reference to association football being played on the ground is on Saturday the 6th of October 1894, when Exeter AFC played Minehead. We're told that in some parts the grass was knee deep, so we have an image of what it might have been like at that time. Exeter AFC then reformed and became Exeter United a couple of seasons later, and Exeter United played here. A pivotal moment for association football in Exeter was in October 1902, when Exeter United played St Sidwell's United, and St Sidwell's won 3-0 and were hailed the city club, the best team in Exeter. St Sidwell's were formed in 1901. These are the origins of our club. In 1904, St Sidwell's changed the name to Exeter City. They kept the nickname the Grecians. They kept the colours, green and white. And in 1908, the club, Exeter City, hired the first professional. There was a scheme to introduce professional football in Exeter. And there were 3 stages to that. The first was the club becoming a limited liability company. The second, an agreement was made with the Clifford Trust that the ground could be leased for 21 years. And thirdly, in May 1908, the club were elected to Division 1 of the Southern League. So by the end of the decade, Exeter had its first professional football club, and first-class football was up and running.
Well, the first big challenge once City went professional was rather bizarrely the length of the pitch. Because unlike today, the pitch was much shorter. And interestingly, it was too short for the regulations of the FA Cup. And this meant that opponents we drew at home refused to play here. In 1910, we played Reading at the old county ground, the rugby ground. But the following opponents, Nelson and Burnley, refused to play in Exeter at all, and we had to play at their grounds. So something had to be done about the pitch, but the landowner wasn't keen to sell the land to the club. So the local MP, Henry Duke, intervened, and he actually persuaded the landowner to sell him 20 foot of land, and the MP then rented that to the club. And that meant we could elongate the pitch, very much as it is today, and once again play FA Cup ties at home. And that was good news, because in 1914, after thumping Portsmouth 4-0 away in the first round, we got the plum draw. We drew Aston Villa, the cup holders, here at home. And it was really the first time that we'd had cup fever in Exeter. So the champions, the cup holders, came here. A crowd of nearly 10,000 were here to watch it, enjoying the new facilities. And Exeter just got edged out 2-1, but it was a very proud day for the club. Of course, within a few months, everything changed. World War I broke out, and in fact, in the first season, 14-15, football continued to be played here. But it was played with an increasing amount of disapproval. People felt the players should be fighting at the front, not playing football. And indeed, when we played West Ham here at home in 1914, there was a big public meeting at the end of the game where army recruitment officials tried to persuade people who hadn't yet signed up to sign up. The end of 1915, the last game of the season was played at home to Reading, and then the ground was transferred to the military authorities. And throughout the war it was used for army purposes. So there was a lot of drilling going on, a lot of marching up and down, shooting practice. But the ground was still kept in condition to play football. And a lot of charity matches were played during the war to raise money for various wartime charities. So that took us right up to 1919 when football started again. Amazingly, the first fixture in that Southern League 1919-20 season was at home to Reading, and they were the team that we'd last played before the war. So there's a certain symmetry to that. So football got going again, and on we went into the Roaring Twenties.
So the 1920s is really, it looks like a period of real development and change for Exeter City Football Club. It kicks off, I mean, it really starts, we've come out of the back of the First World War, and you've got the National Football League starting, which really gives sort of a boost to a sport that's been massively interrupted by the First World War. And so Exeter City become one of the founder members of the Football League in the old Division 3. So the first game's played in 1920, the start of the 2021 season, and you get about 6,000 people coming through the turnstile to watch City win 3-0, with William Wright scoring the first ever league goal for the club. It doesn't pan out like that for the rest of the decade. The highest finish is about 8th in the league. They get to the third round of the League Cup one time, get knocked out by Leeds United. But it is a time when the club kind of, it starts to find its feet, it finds its identity, it becomes more recognisable as the Exeter City people will become familiar with for years after that. One of the issues is financial. Entering into the Football League comes with its own difficulties, as modern football fans will recognise. And so City have to develop players and sell players, one of these being the famous goalkeeper, Dick Pym, who sold to Bolton Wanderers for £5,000. And that sale, amongst a few other transfers that summer in the early 1920s, means that City can then buy the ground outright, they can own the land at St James's Park, and they can start building the football club, they can own their football club and develop it. And the community plays a big role in this as well. Supporters groups are coming together, raising money and funds, and again, things that we're familiar with. And of course there's other stuff like youth development, and one of the players that emerges in the 1920s is Cliff Bastin, who this stand that I'm still on now is named after years and years later. But he's a local boy, he goes to Ladysmith School, and he only plays a handful of games for the City. And he's picked up, he's sold to Arsenal. He goes on to be one of the best players in England, winning the league, the FA Cup, playing for England, etc. So that's cool. It's cool to see these players coming through. And then there's other changes. That's on the pitch. Off the pitch, you get lots of changes around the stadium. So in 1926, the old grandstand, the original old grandstand, burns to the ground. There's a fire, the fire's so hot it can be felt all the way down where the John Lewis building is now. There's a massive blaze. People come out to see it, and everything is completely destroyed. Everything from the roof and the walls and the seats to the players' kit and their boots, etc. So this really forces the club into action, and it forces the community into action. And they both get together and they raise the necessary funds to build the new grandstand, the old grandstand. And then on the other side you had the Popular Stand, and the Popular Stand, or the Primrose Bank, that used to be uncovered. They get a roof on that, and it becomes what people recognise later on as the cowshed. So the 1920s, a real time of change on and off the pitch. It sees developments that the club won't see again for another 80 or so years.
I think the 1930s must have been wild in Exeter. you think of it as black and white, and yet 1930, when we played Sunderland, my father came, he was 8. 20,000 people here, 20,000 in this little ground. The whole place was a carnival. It must have been colourful, red and white. It just must have been so vivid. I forget the fact that you think of the austerity coming out of the 20s and the general strike and stuff like that, and actually, and the teams changing. Why did Exeter's football team change every season? Because they didn't pay the wages through the summer, so they left. I always wondered why they always had a new set of players, but in the 30s it kind of started changing, so they were keeping players for more than one season. People like Stan Hurst, where we've got his medal now, or we've seen access to the medal that he won in the cup. I want the cup back. A lot of the people that come and watch football in Exeter aren't from Exeter. What was the population in Exeter in those days? 80, 90,000? They're not all from Exeter. Who wasn't at the game? Who wasn't involved? I don't know what it was like around the place, but you can imagine when we at the South End when we got relegated, what the place was like and how busy the streets were and everything. In the big games, the streets are busy outside, even when the match is on. There's people peering over, there's people standing in the popular trees over there, the houses at the end, they were there then. People looking out through the houses, but they must have just been absolutely buzzing, like on a good day now, where it's colourful when you get the noise, that you can all remember the Liverpool game in the noise. That was 9,000 people, double that. And people not being restrained, and those stupid rattles that they used to, 1 in 3 people got a rattle. It just must have been as exciting as Liverpool. But the Liverpool, imagine what that's like. People can feel that today, how noisy that was. The Huddersfield game, how noisy, 8,000 people. We're talking about matches where you had 16, 20,000 on a regular, semi-regular basis. And just, in ending up with 39-40. And we all know what happened in 39-40 when the football stopped and we were top of the league or second in the league at the time. There's an irony there. It seems the same happened in the 1914 when the First World War broke out. We were just sort of ready to take off again. It seems to be a theme with Exeter City. When things are going well, something outside stops them. So I don't know. I just think it would have been a really exciting place to be.
So in the 1940s, St James's Park was no longer host to professional football. It didn't mean the end of the ground for local use, community use. It was decided that a regional tournament wouldn't quite suit the footballing needs of the community because the blackout times were coming in a lot closer. No one wants to watch football without having a beer, and they all got to head home. So it was decided that to keep the interest, it'd be better to have more prestige friendlies. There was boxing talked about here as well. The army had requisitioned the ground, so it was in use for the Home Guard. There's a photograph over by the original bank of the Home Guard with their fixed bayonets, and there's about 3,000 fans behind them all cheering them on. So it's a way that, again, community aspect, community coming out, supporting a team of sorts at SJP. One of the photos of the Home Guard on the pitch shows them in front of the big bank, just off to my side here. It's all overgrown. Almost like a jungle, and there's actually stories of local kids coming in and playing amongst the terracing and the flowers and the weeds and shrubbery and kind of experiencing and playing their own little war games. So the ground was in constant use throughout the war, but as we sort of came into peacetime, in sort of 1946 the club reformed, football was played here again, the detritus of war had been removed. The terracing on the big bank had been repurposed and was now considered a very comfortable place to watch local football. After what had been a really tough period for the area, St Sidwell's ward had been completely bombed out. The club needed a huge amount of rebuilding, but they did actually take it on, like the community, and worked upwards into the next decade.
met at the station by Norman Dodgen, and he took me up the club, and it was obvious from looking at Exeter, Sidwell Street at the time, that it was not long after the war. And there were a lot of premises that had been bombed. And it was clear that, the place was a bit run down from that way. But when I got to the football club, it was like Wembley. I thought it was brilliant because it was absolutely dead flat and it was covered in grass. Pontypridd doesn't have pitches like that. Not flat and not covered in grass. So I couldn't wait to get out there, playing in front of big crowds on the pitch that looked like Wembley to me. I found that playing out in front of the stands was fantastic. Playing on the left wing, you get to hear, if you're listening, and if you're a young player, you tend to listen, and you hear these comments, individual comments, especially from people in the stand. I don't know why, but on the Bob Bank, they were all of a muchness and they were all together, I think. But in the stand, you had selective comments, like, go back home, Reese, or well done, Graham, and it seemed to be 50-50. You'd get really good comments coming out, and the next minute you'd do something stupid, and they'd be on your back, There was nothing better than playing on the left wing on the other side, away from the stand, along the Bob Bank, because it was usually heavy over there. It was the pitch was usually heavy, and if you were like me, you were a trier. You weren't brilliant like Gordon Dale, and it hindered him a bit. It didn't hinder me because I was ploughing through the mud, and the crowd loved it. If you ploughed through the mud and kept going, and fullbacks were slithering all over the place, and you kept going through the mud and get into the byline, the crowd loved it. And yeah, they were really supportive on the bankside. The standard of football in the early 50s was quite good, but the players were getting on a bit. They were all players that I looked up to. I was in awe of those players. They'd all played for Manchester United. Andy Donaldson played for Newcastle, Ray Eagleton for Leeds. But they were all in their early 30s. And I thought they were old men. So they were good, but they weren't up to the standard that we got by 1958-9. Frank Broom had come in, and the 58-9 team, that was real quality. If you went through the team, the two wingers, Nelson Stiffel and Gordon Dale, were outstanding. Nelson Stiffel, as quick as a greyhound. Gordon Dale, an absolute ballet dancer on the pitch. He must be the second best player to Cliff Bastin that the club's ever had. Ted Callan, big strong centre forward. Johnny Nichols had played for West Brom in the FA Cup and England. He was inside left. Jimmy Thompson at left half was 2 stone overweight, but he had a left foot that was absolutely brilliant. And he could pick me out. I was doing lots of runs forward in those days, sort of Jamie Vardy type. I'm not comparing myself to Jamie Vardy, but that sort of game. And Jimmy Thompson could pick me out with his left foot going through. And we had a strong defence. Arnold Mitchell and Keith Harvey, Theo Foley, who went on to have a great career at Northampton, Les MacDonald, and a great goalkeeper in George Hunter. It was the best team I've ever played for. I was inside right, only missed a couple of games. I was probably the worst player in the team, but I scored 22 goals. Ted Callan scored 27 goals. We had 49 goals between us, which I say is an all-time club record for twin strikers. 49 goals in one season. There should be a plaque on the wall.
I signed for Exeter City in October 1963. I came from Cambridge City. That particular season obviously was the promotion team, which was the first time Exeter City had ever got promoted. The players we had then were had some terrific players: Dermot Curtis, Arnold Mitchell, Keith Harvey, Graham Rees. But the nice thing about it was we had a fantastic camaraderie together, and it really that was one of the main reasons we got promotion. But also we had in the manager Jack Edwards, who was just completely unbelievable. He really had no assistants at all, never a deputy, none at all. He was the sort of manager, physio, kit man, washing man. He did absolute everything without any help from anybody else in the league. There was 2 games we played in that particular season. One was our very last home game here, which we had to win, and we probably put on our best exhibition of football for many, many years. We beaten Chesterfield 6-1 here, and obviously we had to go away the last game of the season to Workington to get a point to get promoted, which we did do. So when we got off the train at St David's Station in the early hours of Sunday morning, the platform was absolutely crowded with supporters. Unbelievable. When we got outside of the station, there were thousands and thousands of supporters, all with big placards, saying up the city and up, just like things like that.
Match that brought some glamour to football in the West Country. The visit of the European champions, Manchester United, to play lowly Exeter City, placed 91st in the fourth.
One of the big highlights, obviously for me and obviously for a lot of other people in Exeter, was the FA Cup game against Manchester United in 1969, where at the time Man United were European champions, had players in like Best, Charlton, Law, Stiles, Stepney. They were the kings of Europe, and obviously to have them down here in Little Exeter was absolutely fantastic. When we played them, there was 18,500 people here, which nowadays is unbelievable.
Oh, a lovely goal, and it's there, a lovely goal! Alan Banks is the scorer, what a goal!
The ground now has changed quite a lot since then, and obviously for the better. But the nice thing about this club is the fans. They're very, very loyal, and without them, we wouldn't have a football club here. No way.
Coming in here today, I just couldn't believe it, that nothing's changed. Might be, paintwork might be a little bit better, but it's nothing, couldn't believe it, and I didn't realise it's so small.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to sit there and
we
managed to warm up here. We used to do our warm-ups in the change room.
Yeah, and, we'd go around there and somebody would say, right, knees up, knees down. The old studs would be going and you think, Christ almighty. Lee Roberts, you get somebody like him, would never warm up. He'd sit in the corner.
Yeah.
Just sit in the corner and thinking about the game, and whereas he needed to, mind you, didn't he? But we used to train out here on the track here. Didn't we, John? You'd have a training day here, and there's probably 20-25 players here then. Grouped in both dressing rooms.
Yeah,
and then a lot of banter used to go on, and
we had no facilities here.
No,
I mean, you'd come in on a Monday, and if it was tipping down with rain, we thought, well, what are we going to do today? Is he going to run us around the track? And very often we'd go to the uni.
Yeah.
If they could get in, or we'd go to Barrack Road, the old Barrack
Road. Yeah.
So there was no cat and fiddle. There was no facilities really, but we got on with it.
Yeah, but it was days when there wasn't great coaching going on. It was just a lot of man management. you know, at the end of the day. And we used to look after ourselves, you know, a lot of the time. But that's the way it was though, John.
Yeah, yeah.
I loved it. Loved it. Wouldn't never change a day.
Enjoyed it, no.
You know, you'd have the big bank at the back there, and then you'd have the terracing over there. And I had my fan base over there because they used to give it 6 foot 2 eyes of blue Jimmy Jarvis after you. So, you know, if I ever scored, that's where I would go. And
it wasn't very often, man.
It's true. but no, it's the fans were brilliant. If they see you giving 100%, you never had no qualms.
But yeah, the Aldershot game here was unbelievable atmosphere. I believe it was 14,000, and as we scored a goal, you know, the fans would run on. I mean, we were promoted anyway, but it was fantastic. How often you wouldn't get away with it nowadays.
What a great goal by a man who could be playing for Wales in 2 weeks' time. Jennings must be 3-0. There it is. Almost too easy at this stage. Time this match, we get a crowd invasion, but they've still got to wait 8 minutes. 3-0. Jennings the scorer.
I remember being outside the Guildhall, you know, having gained promotion, arriving back in Exeter, and then going around the town in the coach and being at the top of the Guildhall, looking down at thousands of people underneath, and it was quite amazing, really.
But it was a good squad then, though, John, wasn't it? You know, I knew that when I come back here, that, you know, the squad I was coming to, and I thought, you know, we can go on again here. There's no doubt about it, you know. But again, I think what carried it through a lot was the team spirit was fantastic, John. It's the best I've ever known, I think.
So one of the great nights of the decade obviously was the replay against Newcastle. Perfect performance. Strange, if you like, to see us win 4-0, batter a team, and Kells doesn't get a goal, but that tells you something about the rest of the team. Fantastic goals. Hatchie was from the corner. Hatchie's corner, not Lee Holmes's corner. The flying milkman, Pearson, with his overhead kick, and then the Rogers brothers either side of half time. Just fantastic. Huge crowd. The place was buzzing, and for me it's great because I can nip out, catch the bus home, leg it down Ede Lane and watch Sports Night with Coleman and watch it all over again. So the 1980s just pretty much sum up being an Exeter City supporter. You start with a fantastic team with great characters that the fans loved. Brilliant nights, brilliant away matches, fantastic FA Cup run, great position in the league. Then, you know, it just can't get any worse, can it? You know, relegation, terrible performances, chaos off the pitch and on it, horrible results. You know, you don't want to come to your own ground, do you, and go home beaten 7-1. Managers who you think, oh, this has got to really turn it around. You know, Jerry Francis, Premiership, or what was the Premiership in those days, England International. No, nothing. You get it interspersed with those moments of what being an Exeter City supporter is about. You know, going to Everton in the FA Cup, putting on a really good performance, just really unlucky to lose 1-0. And then you come to the end of that decade with an absolutely fantastic team again, new manager, real grit, proper football manager, and a really decent team. The thing about that team was it was a throwback to teams in the 70s and to some extent in the 60s, where this place was fortress. You didn't lose. You didn't lose at home in the league, and you actually seldom lost cup games, even against higher opposition. This place was Fortress St James.
Bailey, lovely enterprising play by City, into the area, Vinicum!
The Terry Cooper 89-90 team, they brought that back. We just didn't lose at home. So you start with Kello and Delve and Hatchie and Giler, real fans' favourites, fantastic people who, we see them all now. And then you finish that decade with another bunch of really, really nice people. So yeah, just about sums up being an Exeter City supporter.
Well, the 90s certainly began with a bang. Probably our only championship win in all of our history. Division 4 champions, 1990. Had a great team then, absolutely super team, fantastic players. Kevin Miller, young Scott Hiley and old Clive Whitehead, but they all contributed fantastically to the team. Stevie Neville, I always remember Stevie Neville and Darren Rowbottom up front, who were like the lower level Russian Dalglish. The number of goals that Darren Rowbottom scored was matched by the assist from Steve Neville. The team carried on in awesome form, swept everything before them, and we were wandering around St James Park with a trophy, which was just brilliant. Pitch invasions a lot. It was just a wonderful time. And after that we moved up a tier, and Terry Cooper was manager, and it got a little bit more difficult for us really, and Alan Ball came in. A few notable sort of achievements in his time here. We did the double over Plymouth in one season. I think it's the first time we'd played them in a good few years, and we did 2-0 and a 3-0 win, which clearly went down well with City fans. So we had kind of good times through, but it sort of started to get a little harder, and the club went into its latest financial meltdown in '94. And ended up having to sell the ground to survive. Probably a fire sale at that time didn't give us the best price ever, and perhaps probably the sale of Martin Phillips was one of the things that helped to survive at the time. Peter Fox came in the mid-90s. He didn't really have a lot to work with, and I think the second half of the decade was pretty tricky times really, as you had to deal with the club having precious little money. The impact of selling the ground meant that of course we didn't have any collateral to work with, so when you're trying to finance things or do things, we had just nothing to work with. You lose, you sell at the time because it's the right move, but of course in hindsight it would have been perhaps best to try to do our utmost just to keep hold of it, because it would have given us something of our own. We would give some collateral to work with, but that wasn't the case, and so be it. But things have worked out. We're still here and still going strong. A little bit more positive sort of sign was right at the end of the decade. We had the redevelopment of what was the cowshed and the big bank, new stands which are sitting in now. Sadly, it meant that we lost the famous old Primrose Bank, which was long in front of the cowshed. Very famous sort of around football as a little sort of unique thing, another one of our little unique foibles that we had at the park. But I do know that lots of primroses, or future generations of those original primroses, do exist around Exeter, so it wasn't so bad. They're still there if you want to find them somewhere around Exeter. So, started the decade on a bang, ended it with perhaps a little positive note in the terms of the ground was sort of getting a makeover. But, there were tougher times ahead in the noughties.
yeah, I mean, as I said, we were coming to football matches anyway, just as a fan, and bringing Thomas as he got a little bit older, and occasionally sort of watching matches, and we came to the Southend game, and I can remember Paul saying we're going to have to leave really, really early because it's going to be very busy, and we may not get a ticket, and we might not get in. And we did, and we were in the old grandstand, and everybody surrounding us had radios listening to the Swansea match, what was happening, and Kevin Miller saves the penalty, and we're all really excited. And then, of course, at the end of that, no, we weren't. We were out of the league. And I wasn't that. It was like, okay, yeah, well, we'll still be playing football next year. I couldn't really get why everybody else around me was so upset. And then I think the whole Russell and Lewis thing kicked off, and the following week was just bizarre, and the news, and there were, they were locked out, and the police were called, and they were arrested, and it was like some kind of soap opera. Didn't really seem to fit with the football club.
Well, yeah, of course. It literally fell apart, didn't it? We ended up with, as they went, in fact, we got relegated. So I was very interested then, or I'd got very interested. Actually, Norman Warren, who's still around doing our quizzes, was a guy who dragged me along to 2 or 3 of the trust meetings, and again, I wasn't interested. But I did actually see 2 or 3 of those, and then the last one I saw somebody called Terry Pavey, and Terry Pavey was one of the 3 people that signed the 288, which is the document you have to sign, otherwise the club would have gone into liquidation. It was me, Terry, and Ian Huxon. And I'd seen Terry do an organogram and how it might work. And I remember thinking at that time, I think that's about 3 or 4 years away, maybe. But you know what? That might have a chance. And of course, I think it was no more than about 5 or 6 months later that actually it came to. Of course, nobody was ready. That wasn't what. But in times of adversity, people get together and they circle round. And whilst I didn't do the deal, the trust did the deal with Ivor Doble. I wasn't in the middle of that deal. I did an awful lot of work to put all the different parties together because something had to happen.
And it was the time, I think, when the Supporters Trust stepped in to try and see if they could keep things running. And I joined the first work party in May 2003 with others out there weeding and painting, and that's how the summer went. I think everybody at that time, the thought that the football club might disappear, it was one thing to think, oh yes, okay, we've been relegated, we're going to be in the conference, but then suddenly when you haven't got anything and there's a real chance that this club is going to go out of business, the people get more involved. And I think that's when a lot of fans just said, okay, if I can do something, I'll do something. There was no harm in trying. If we didn't try, then there would be no Exeter City Football Club.
One of the things I like about that was Dino. Dino knocked that goal in from, I don't know, 45, 50 yards. And he's on there, he's on the telly, he scored the goal, and he's happy as Larry.
So we've beaten Grimsby, we've beaten Doncaster, and we're in there we are. And we're actually in the draw. And then that ball came out, and you're just looking at the television thinking, has that really happened?
Of course, I was with Alex and Steve at his house when that came out. Well, they jumped up, I nearly fell on the floor, they're jumping around, sort of just, because, a lot of people have put in a mountain of time, and, oh my God, the anxiety of trying to make it work and to make something that was clearly very, very, very broken in every way. To get that, Eamon had done a great job getting it, and then Alex had taken it on again, but it was still a million miles from something proper.
That was the game that gave us the money to come out of the CVA. So it paid off the debts. It gave us that breathing space. It just took all of the pressure away. I'm not saying that without it we wouldn't have managed. I think we probably would, because we had the Red or Dead pledges. That money was there. And I think that that would have grown as we got closer to the end. So we had a substantial amount of money in that anyway.
lots of people say you wouldn't have made it. I totally disagree. Totally. We would have made it. It would just taken us a lot longer. You know, we would have got there somehow. I don't have any shadow of a doubt. And I actually rail against people that said, oh, it was only the Man United. No, we'd have got there, but it would have just taken longer. In those days, I don't know that the same applies now, but we were quite a big fish. We had every right to, you know, we were getting good gates. In fact, I think we had greys here with 5,000 or 6,000, you know, greys. Where are greys now? And I was never worried before, because I see these people pump a load of money in and I see them go out and I see them come back so fast. It doesn't happen quite so much now. But, you know, with the right manager, using the money in the right way, with the added of the youth players. So then you had momentum. So they're coming through. You've got a good team because you have a reasonable budget in that. It wasn't the biggest, but it wasn't far off the biggest. So then the best thing we ever did was lose at Wembley the first time. Now, that's a funny thing for somebody to say, but what that gave us was a huge cash injection. Made the selling of the season tickets and all the other things that were going on so much easier the year after, so the momentum builds again. Great crowds, and we get to the playoffs again. So now you've had a 2-year roller coaster of things going on, and you get to Wembley and then you win. So now you have the finance again. So during that first year, you've used it to top up and use wisely for your players. You're still bringing young players through, which you're also selling. So now financially, you're really making you're gaining momentum. You win the Wembley the second time round. So again, the finance from that, and they're all the extras that go with it. So now you're attracting the players in, and at that point, Paul had only ever signed out of the conference, only ever signed players that he thought could play in the league above. Well, actually, not only did they do that, but he thought they could play the league above that again. You know, the Ryan Harleys of this world and so on that people didn't know. So that momentum gained, and then of course we went straight through 2 leagues.
Yeah, well, it is going to be one, isn't it, that will stick in the history for forever. Because, as I said, you start off with this, you know, the standard ownership, Exeter City, you know, always sort of being there or thereabouts, sort of round about the bottom of the Football League, or mid-table if we're lucky, and then all of that bizarre stuff that surrounded the ownership, and then we end up changing the ownership model, that we show we can do it. As supporters, you know, fans can have a say in how their football club is run. They can be an ownership model, a supporters trust ownership model, and we were the first to do that. So, and success, because under that, you know, we got the as well as, you know, holding Manchester United to a draw at Old Trafford in the FA Cup, and then, you know, back-to-back promotions. So, yeah, a memorable decade.
Over the last 10 years, we've become, through some of my efforts, but mainly by the efforts of everyone, you know, that it's the sum of all parts, really. We've become a very healthy, established club, and we've certainly gained credibility. I suppose it's hard to pick out one. There's some days in League One, beating Leeds United at home is a favourite. In the rain, it was, a 2-0 victory, and there was rain, and it was a misty day, and it was just almost surreal moment to be beating Leeds United. Drawing with Liverpool at home recently in the FA Cup was just a magical day for Exeter, not just Exeter Football Club. It was a magical day. It was live on BBC One Match of the Day Friday night. It was prime viewing, and the whole club, the image of the club was fabulous. It's hard to pick just the one, but I think probably it would be that Huddersfield at home last game of the season, needing to win to stay up, and we did it. Well, you've got an old-fashioned stadium that's quirky, that's odd looking, that's got. If you stand in the director's box, you can look out. You see terrace streets behind the old grandstand. There's gaps. There's the railway line. It's not symmetrical. It's odd. There's a little bit. If you look behind the facade, it's a little bit dilapidated in the corners over the back of the grandstand, and then you've got this very imposing terrace, the big bank behind one goal, and which holds thousands of people, and when it's packed, it's fantastic. You could be in a championship ground. You're not talking about this sort of symmetrical, stereotypical stadium that we see so often now. That's characterless, and you turn around, it looks the same one to the other. This is a unique place. The grandstand has had 100 plus years of people in and out of it, and it's odd and it's quirky and it's not fit for purpose anymore in the modern game, but we love it, and it's a bit damp in the places, and you come in every now and then, and there's a mushroom growing in the corner on the carpet. It's just got that sort of old, damp, horrid feel about it, but we love it, and there's so much about it, and every week you come into work for a home game, you recognise faces, the smells, the noises. You can hear the cars in certain parts of the ground, and especially an hour before kick-off and an hour after the end of the game when everyone's gone. The game's just gone. You can still sort of feel the hubbub of the day, but it's died down. The number of times I've had my food and I've had a cup of coffee at the end of a Tuesday night game, and it's now 11 o'clock at night. Everyone's gone, and the floodlights go out. And I just sit there, and you can just. And I go out onto the seats, and I just sit there and have a deep breath because my adrenaline's still sky high, and it's all gone quiet. And you hear the seagulls, and you know it's just gone, and then it all starts again for the next week. It's got its own sort of personality and energy, and it's hideous in some places. If you want to look at the away dressing room and the sole toilet and the shower and the tiles and it's not fit for purpose, but you look at some of it and you think it's fantastic. And I love coming into the ground before a game and looking across to the terrace streets behind the grandstand. You can see the weather about half an hour before it hits you. You can see it coming, and then it starts, and the warm up, and the players come in, and then the supporters come in, the stewards, and the same man sits there with his fish and chips an hour and a half before kick-off. He turns up so early, and we see him every week, and he's having his fish and chips, and he's in the same seat, and there's that sort of feel to it. And after 10 years, it's just become the norm for me. It's become home. But so it's wonderful to be part of all that, and I'm gonna. If whatever happens going forward, I'll look back very fondly of my time at St James's Park.
Thank you.